I'm Thuranki Ramatiraka. This is the fifth in a series of videos, the entirety of the book Karma by Annie Besant. The ceasing of karma. Karma brings us ever back to rebirth, binds us to the wheel of births and deaths. Good karma drags us back as relentlessly as bad, and the chain which is wrought out of our virtues holds as firmly and as closely as that forged from our vices. How then shall the weaving of the chain be put an end to? Since man must think and feel as long as he lives, and since thoughts and feelings are ever generating karma. The answer to this is the great lesson of the Bhagavad Gita, a lesson taught to the warrior prince. Neither to hermit nor to student was that lesson given, but to the warrior striving for victory, the prince immersed in his duties of his state. Not in action, but in desire. Not in action, but in attachment to its fruit lies the binding force of action. An action is performed with desire to enjoy its fruit. A course is adopted with desire to obtain its results. The soul is expectant, and nature must reply to it. It has demanded, and nature must reward. To every cause is bound its effect. To every action is fruit, and desire is the cord that links them together, the thread that runs between. If this could be burned up, the connection would cease. And when all the bonds of the heart are broken, the soul is free. Karma can then no longer hold it. Karma can then no longer bind it. The wheel of cause and effect may continue to turn, but the soul has become the liberated life. Without attachment, constantly perform action, which is duty. For performing action without attachment, man verily reaches the supreme. To perform this yoga of action, or as it is called, karma yoga, man must perform every action merely as duty, doing all in harmony with the law. Seeking to conform to the law on any plane of being on which he is busied, he aims at becoming a force working with the divine will for evolution, and yields a perfect obedience in every phase of his activity. Thus all his actions partake of the nature of sacrifice, you see, and are offered for the turning of the wheel of the law, not for any fruit that it may bring. The action is performed as duty. The fruit is joyfully given for the helping of men. He has no concern with it. It belongs to the law, and to the law he leaves it for distribution. And so we read, whose works are all free from the molding of desire, whose actions are burned up by the fire of wisdom, he is called a sage by the spiritually wise. Having abandoned all attachment to the fruit of action, always content, seeking refuge in none, although doing actions, he is not doing anything. Free from desire, his thoughts controlled by the self, the true self, having abandoned all attachment, performing action by the body alone, he does not commit sin. Content with whatsoever he receiveth, free from the pairs of opposites, without envy, balanced in success and failure, though he hath acted, he is not bound. For with attachment dead, harmonious, his thoughts established in wisdom, his works sacrifices, all his action melts away. Body and mind work out their full activities. With the body, all bodily action is performed. With the mind, all mental. But the self remains serene, untroubled, lending not of its eternal essence to forge the chains of time. Right action is never neglected, but is faithfully performed to the limit of the available powers. Renunciation of attachment to the fruit, not implying any sloth or carelessness in acting. The man who reaches this state of inaction in action has learned the secret of the ceasing of karma. He destroys by knowledge the action he has generated in the past. He burns up the action of the present by devotion. Then it is that he attains the state spoken of by John the Divine in the Revelation, in which the man goeth no more out of the temple. For the soul goes out of the temple many and many a time into the plains of life, but the time arrives when he becomes a pillar, or, quotes, a pillar in the temple of my God. That temple is the universe of liberated souls. And only those who are bound to nothing for themselves can be bound to everyone in the name of the one life. These bonds of desire, then, of personal desire, nay, of individual desire, must be broken. We can see how the breaking will begin. And here comes in a mistake which many young students are apt to fall into. A mistake so natural and easy that it is constantly occurring. We do not break the bonds of the heart by trying to kill the heart. We do not break the bonds of desire by trying to turn ourselves into stones or pieces of metal unable to feel. The disciple becomes more sensitive, not less so, as he nears his liberation. He becomes more tender and not more hard. For the perfect disciple who is as the master is the one who answers to every thrill in the outside universe, who is touched by and responds to everything, who feels and answers to everything, who just because he desires nothing for himself is able to give everything to all. Such a one cannot be held by karma. He forges no bonds to bind the soul. As the disciple becomes more and more a channel of divine life to the world, he asks nothing save to be a channel, with wider and wider bed along which the great life may flow. His only wish is that he may become a larger vessel, with less of obstacle in himself to hinder the outward pouring of the life, working for nothing save to be of service. That is the life of discipleship. That is it, in which the bonds that bind are broken. But there is one bond that breaks not ever. The bond of that real unity, which is no bond, for it cannot be distinguished as separate. That which unites the one to the all, the disciple to the master to his disciple. The divine life which draws us ever onwards and upwards, which binds us not to the wheel of birth and to death. We are drawn back to earth, first by desire for what we enjoy there, then by higher and higher desires which still have earth for their region of fulfillment, for spiritual knowledge, spiritual growth, spiritual devotion. What is it, when all is accomplished, that still binds the masters to the world of men? Not anything that the world can offer them. There is no knowledge on earth that they don't have. There is no power on earth that they do not wield. There is no further experience that might enrich their lives. There is nothing that the world can give them that can draw them back to birth, and yet they come because a divine compulsion that is from within and not from without sends them to the earth, which otherwise they might leave forever to help their brethren, to labor century after century, millennium after millennium, for the joy and the service that make their love and peace ineffable, with nothing that the earth can give them, save the joy of seeing other souls growing into their likeness, beginning to share with them the conscious life of God. Before moving to the next section here, collective karma, I just want to make a side note that in this last section here, ceasing of karma, if you have been following along through this entire playlist, the entire playlist in which this book, Karma, is presented by me, the playlist called Personal Evolution Part 3 and Achievement Training, I hope you'll notice a lot of parallels with other things, parallels among this last section, Ceasing of Karma, and other material that's been presented previously in this playlist. For example, desire, the distinction between desires rooted in physical plane life versus the one desire, the one root desire for unity, self-realization, the identifying of the individual with the universal. I hope that you have noticed a lot of parallels. I noticed 5 or 6 things that were exactly the same as what's been presented earlier in this playlist. So I hope that you can find the parallels for yourself. Another one was finding balance among success and failure. Another one was eliminating the opposites. These things have been talked about before numerous times in this playlist. So I hope that, again, you've noticed the parallels or the repetitions. Because where there are repetitions and parallels, these are good things to make note of. Because then, they are important points. They are correspondences among different points of view. Collective karma. The gathering together of souls into groups, forming families, castes, nations, races, introduces a new element of perplexity into karmic results. And it is here that room is found for what are called so-called accidents, as well as for the adjustments continually being made by the lords of karma. It appears that while nothing can befall a man that is not in his karma, so to speak, as an individual, advantage may be taken of, say, a national or a seismic catastrophe to enable him to work off a piece of bad karma which would not normally have fallen into the lifespan through which he's passing. It appears, I can only speak here on speculatively, not having definite knowledge on this point, it appears as though sudden death could not strike off a man's body unless he owed such a death to the law, no matter into what whirl of catastrophic disaster he may be hurled. He would be what is called miraculously preserved amid the death and ruin that swept away his neighbors, and emerge unharmed from tempest or fiery outbreak. But if he owed a life, and were drawn by his national or family karma within the area of such a disturbance, then, although such sudden death had not been woven into his linga sharira for that special life, no active interference might be made for his preservation. Special care would be taken of him afterwards that he might not suffer unduly from his sudden snatching out of earth life, but he would be allowed to pay his debt on the arising of such an opportunity, brought within his reach by the wider sweep of the law, by the collective karma that involves him. Similarly, benefits may accrue to him by his indirect action of the law, as when he belongs to a nation that is enjoying the fruit of some good national karma, and he may thus receive some debt owed to him by nature, the payment of which would not have fallen within his present lot had only his individual karma been concerned. A man's birth in a particular nation is influenced by certain general principles of evolution as well as by his immediate characteristics. The soul in its slow development has not only to pass through the 7 root races of a globe, an ideal here with the normal evolution of humanity, but also through the sub-races. This necessity imposes certain conditions, to which the individual karma must adapt itself. And a nation belonging to the sub-race through which the soul has to pass will offer the area within which the more special conditions needed must be found. Where long series of incarnations have been followed, it has been found that some individuals progress from sub-race to sub-race very regularly, whereas others are more erratic, taking repeated incarnations perhaps in one sub-race. Within the limits of the sub-race, the individual characteristics of the man will draw him towards one nation or another, and we may notice dominant national characteristics re-emerging on the stage of history en bloc after the normal interval of 1,500 years. Thus, crowds of Romans reincarnate as Englishmen, the enterprising, colonizing, conquering, imperial instincts reappearing as national attributes. A man in whom such national characteristics were strongly marked, and whose time for rebirth has come, would be drafted into the English nation by his karma, and would then share the national destiny for good or for evil, so far as that destiny affected the fate of the individual. The family tie is naturally of a more personal character than is the national, and those who weave bonds of close affection in one life tend to be drawn together again as members of the same family. Sometimes these ties recur very persistently, life after life, and the destinies of two individuals are very intimately interwoven in successive incarnations. Sometimes, in consequence of the different lengths of the devachans necessitated by differences of intellectual and spiritual activity during their earth lives spent together, members of a family may be scattered and may not meet again until after several incarnations. Speaking generally, the more close the tie in the higher regions of life, the greater the likelihood of rebirth in a family group. Here again, the karma of the individual is affected by the interlinked karmas of his family, and he may enjoy or suffer through these in a way not inherent in his own life karma, and so receive or pay karmic debts out of date, as we may say. So far as the personality is concerned, this seems to bring with it a certain balancing up or compensation in Kamaloka and Devachan, in order that complete justice may be done even to the fleeting personality. The working out in detail of collective karma would carry us far beyond the limits of such an elementary work as the present, and far beyond the knowledge of the writer. Only these fragmentary hints can at present be offered to the student. For precise understanding, a long study of individual cases would be necessary, traced through many thousands of years. Speculation on these matters is idle. It is patient observation that is needed. There is, however, one other aspect of collective karma on which some word may fitly be said. The relation between men's thoughts and deeds and the aspects of external nature. On this obscure subject, Madame Blavatsky has said the following. Quote, following Plato, Aristotle explained that the term elements was understood only as meaning the incorporeal principles placed in each of the four great divisions of our cosmical world to supervise them. Thus, no more than Christians do pagans adore and worship the elements and the imaginary cardinal points, but the, so to speak, gods that respectively rule over them. For the church, there are two kinds of sidereal beings, angels and devils. For the Kabbalist and occultist, there is one class. And neither occultist nor Kabbalist makes any difference between the rectors of light and the rectores tenebrarium, or the cosmocratores, whom the Roman Church imagines and discovers in the rectors of light. As soon as any one of them is called by another name than the one she addresses them by. It is not the rector or the Maharaja who punishes or rewards, with or without, so to speak, God's permission or order, but man himself, his deeds or karma, attracting individually and collectively, as in the case of whole nations sometimes, every kind of evil and calamity. We produce causes, and these awaken the corresponding powers in the sidereal world, which are magnetically and irresistibly attracted to and react upon those who produce such causes. Whether such persons are practically the evildoers or simply thinkers who brood mischief. For thought is matter. We are taught by modern science, and every particle of the existing matter must be a register of all that has happened. Modern science is every day drawn more into the maelstrom of occultism, unconsciously, no doubt still very sensibly. Thought is matter. Not, of course, however, in the sense of the German materialist Malerschat, who assures us that thought is the movement of matter, a statement of almost unparalleled absurdity. Mental states and bodily states are utterly contrasted as such. But that does not affect the position that every thought, in addition to its physical accompaniment or brain change, exhibits an objective, though to us supersensuously objective, exhibits an objective aspect on the astral plane. That is the end of that quote. Now, it seems that when men generate a large number of malignant thought forms of a destructive character, and when these congregate in huge masses on the astral plane, their energy may be, and is, precipitated on the physical plane, stirring up wars, revolutions, and social disturbances and upheavals of every kind, falling as collective karma on their progenitors and effecting widespread ruin. Thus, then, collectively, also, man is the master of his destiny, and his world is molded by his creative action. Epidemics of crime and disease, cycles of accidents have a similar explanation. Thought forms of anger aid in the perpetration of a murder. These elementals are nourished by the crime, and the results of the crime, the hatred and the revengeful thoughts of those who love the victim, the fierce resentment of the criminal, has baffled fury when violently sent out of the world, still further reinforce their host with many malignant forms. These again, from the astral plane, impel an evil man to fresh crime, and again the circle of new impulses is trodden, and again the circle of new impulses is trodden, and we have an epidemic of violent deeds. Diseases spread, and the thoughts of fear which follow their progress act directly as strengtheners of the power of the disease. Magnetic disturbances are set up and propagated and react on the magnetic spheres of people within the affected area. In every direction, in endless fashions, do men's evil thoughts play havoc. As he who should have been a divine co-builder in the universe uses his creative power to destroy. Conclusion. Such is an outline of the great law of karma and of its workings, by a knowledge of which a man may accelerate his evolution, by the utilization of which a man may free himself from bondage, and become long ere his race has trodden its course, one of the helpers and saviors of the world. A deep and a steady conviction of the truth of this law gives to life an immovable serenity and a perfect fearlessness. Nothing can touch us that we have not wrought. Nothing can injure us that we have not merited. And as everything that we have sown must ripen into harvest in its due season and must be reaped, it is idle to lament over the reaping when it is painful. It may as well be done now as at any future time, since it cannot be evaded, and once done, it cannot return to trouble us again. I want to repeat that. As everything that we have sown must ripen into harvest in due season and must be reaped, it is idle to lament over the reaping when it is painful. It may as well be done now as at any future time, since it cannot be evaded, and once done, it cannot return to trouble us again. I want to point something out just as a side note here regarding that one of the repeated phrases just now. It is idle to lament over the reaping when it is painful. There was a time in my life when I felt anxiety, deep existential angst. It was almost debilitating. When I had got a point of clarity over the fact that I had probably had a lot of undesirable karma to work out. And it just seemed, I felt the weight, an immense weight upon me when I had some moments of clarity over that. It took me some while to find my way out of the anxiety and the near depression that caused, that realization caused me. But I have come to know that it is idle to lament over the reaping when it is painful. I am another way to look at the results of much of the material that I am putting here in this playlist is that it gets us to work on getting through the karma, generating better karma, and getting beyond the workings of karma, the bonds of karma itself. And, of course, getting over the lamentation or the anxiety over the reaping itself. That's the end of my side note. You see, painful karma may therefore well be faced with a joyful heart, as a thing to be gladly worked through and done with. It is better to have it behind us than before us, and every debt paid leaves us with less to pay. Would that the world knew and could feel the strength that comes from this resting on the law. Unfortunately, to most in the Western world, it is a mere chimera. And even among theosophists, belief in karma is more an intellectual assent than a living and fruitful conviction in the light of which the life is lived. The strength of a belief is measured by its influence on conduct, and belief in karma ought to make the life pure, strong, serene, and glad. Only our own deeds can hinder us. Only our own will can fetter us. Once let men recognize this truth, and the hour of their liberation has struck, nature cannot enslave the soul that by wisdom has gained power and uses both in love. But that's the end of the book. Be well.